Hey there, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of True North Sports Talk Podcast. It's Peter Barclay here, and as always, hosting your episode for the day. Now, today, this might be a little bit of a longer episode than what we're used to, but today we are diving deep into one of the most explosive legal battles, not just in the sport that it's in, but in all of sport, in the history of sport. And what might that be? Well, this is coming to you from the sport of NASCAR. And who'da thunk, right? NASCAR's always just been who can go faster. Then they made some rules and who can go faster within the rules. Right? So it's always just been man and machine and who can get the most out of it. Well, motorsports now has its first real legal testing because it hasn't been necessarily like other sports where you have the professional ranks, the minor league ranks, and you have driver bodies, as it were, like unions involved. There's never been unions in NASCAR. However, this legal battle is not about unions either. However, you don't have to be a NASCAR enthusiast to recognize the name involved. This is a person who is widely recognized throughout the entire world of sport. So if you're anywhere on the peripheries of sport, you will recognize who is at the forefront. And we are talking about none other than Michael Jordan. And yes, it is that Michael Jordan who came up in '84 with the Chicago Bulls, dominated pretty much from about 86 to 98 when he retired the second time. Came back a third time and didn't quite dominate the same, but the goal was different in that third time. And he basically did everything he set out to do. So now, a few years ago, you may remember, if you are even the smallest of NASCAR fans, that Michael Jordan formed a new team with one of the drivers from NASCAR, Denny Hamlin, and if you're a NASCAR fan, you recognize that name, to make 23XI, so 11, so 2311, that's Michael Jordan's playing number, and Denny Hamlin's racing number, so 23XI Racing. And they have, I think, 3 cars under their umbrella, one of which is Bubba Wallace, which makes sense being as he is one of the very few in NASCAR to have the same skin color as Michael Jordan. And so it's always just been a really neat story. And Michael's not the first basketball player, believe it or not, to have ventured into the world of motorsports. If you remember, maybe 20 years ago, one of the commentators was Brad Doherty. And he also was a former basketball player from the 80s and the 90s, if you can go back far enough to remember those days. So, what does Michael Jordan have reason to take on the entire sport of NASCAR in federal court? Well, Michael Jordan and Jenkins. Let me go down and just see. Bob Jenkins, is it? Forgive me for not having that name on the tip of my tongue. I remember that it's Jenkins. Forgive me. Where is it? There it is. Yes, Bob Jenkins. Forgive me. I knew it. It just wasn't coming to me. So they were the only two team owners who basically said no to the new basically franchise model that NASCAR had gone to. And we'll get into the wherefores and the whyfores and how all that works later on. But Michael Jordan alleged significant antitrust, and this is one of the most significant cases that we will find in sports. And you might think these are billionaires and millionaires arguing. Well, that isn't actually the case. This isn't just about money. This is about the future of NASCAR. We're talking about a trial that started December 1st in Charlotte, North Carolina. We've heard testimony so far. It's been absolutely wild, from Denny Hamlin breaking down in tears on the witness stand to Michael Jordan taking the stand, believe it or not. Who'd have thought you'd ever see him in a court like this? He's calling out NASCAR's business practices, and there's been other revelations about how much money some of these teams are actually losing. And here's the thing, not just NASCAR people, but people are searching for answers. They want to know, who's the cast of characters? Why is Michael Jordan suing, of all people? What happens if he wins? What happens if he loses? We're going to answer all of that and more. So keep going with this episode. You want to stay right to the end to find out where we think this is going. So buckle up. This is going to be a long one, but trust me, you're going to want to know all of these details as this courtroom drama unfolds, reminiscent of Perry Mason. Y'all old enough to remember him? I know I am. So let's dive right into it. Let's understand NASCAR's charter system. And the charter system is like franchises in other sports. So that's going to be the synonym there. So before we get into the courtroom drama, we need to understand why they're fighting in the first place. And that starts with NASCAR's new charter system. Again, think of charters like franchises in other sports. In the NBA, you own a team. That's your franchise, that's your asset. In NASCAR, it's a little bit different. So back before 2016, teams had to qualify for every single race. If you didn't make it or didn't qualify, you didn't race. No race means no sponsor exposure, which means you're bleeding money. So there was always incentive for teams to do well. And again, that lent to what I mentioned earlier, just man and machine, who's better on that day. So it was a real nerve-wracking thing each week for all these teams to make sure that they were fast enough to qualify. So in 2016, that changed a little bit. NASCAR introduced the charter system. So here's how it works. There are 36 charters available. If you have a charter, you are guaranteed a starting spot in every single one of the 38 Cup Series races. You don't have to qualify. Plus you get a share of NASCAR's revenue. So that's kind of like how franchises work, right? In other sports. So the field size is 40 cars. So that leaves 4 spots that are open for teams that don't have charters to qualify based on speed. So these open teams get significantly less money because they don't get a share of the revenue. So when the charter system launched, the idea was to create value for team owners. before the charters, if your team went out of business, you basically got pennies on the dollar for your equipment. The cars became outdated fast, but with charters, you now have something you can sell. And we've seen the value skyrocket. In 2016, Michael Waltrip Racing sold its 2 charters for $1 million each. Fast forward to late 2024, when Michael Jordan and 23XI Racing, which is Jordan's team, we all mentioned that, they paid $28 million for a single share or a single charter. That's a 2,700% increase in less than a decade. I don't know what business you're in, but wouldn't you like a 2,700% increase in profits in less than 10 years? So here's the catch, and this is crucial. NASCAR doesn't give you permanent ownership of these charters. So you paid $28 million and you don't own it? That's a lot of money for a rental or a long-term lease. The current agreement runs from 2025 to 2031. 7 years, that's tied to NASCAR's TV deal. After that, NASCAR can renegotiate, change the terms, or theoretically eliminate the system altogether. Teams get about $12.5 million per chartered car annually under the current agreement. Sounds like a lot? Well, according to testimony in this trial, it costs about $20 million per season just to operate a single cup car. And that's before you pay your driver or cover business overhead. So buying tools, travel expenses, all these kind of things is part of your business overhead. You rent or you own a shop. You have vehicles to deal with, like your haulers, your backup equipment, all of these kind of things. So you're looking at anywhere between $50 to $100 million per season for these teams to operate. And then some of these drivers, based on their winnings and the contracts they have with the teams, they basically can make anywhere between $10 and $20 million a year sometimes, these drivers. So it's a very, very expensive sport to be a part of. So even with the charter, teams are still dependent on sponsorship money to survive. And so that's where the tension even starts to begin. The charter agreement also comes with restrictions. There's a no sue clause. So teams can't take NASCAR to court over antitrust issues if they are willing to sign the charter. And so this is the problem, or why you only see 2 teams that have sued NASCAR. All the other teams signed the dotted line, including testimony you will hear later from Joe Gibbs Racing. And a lot of the teams felt pressured or bullied into signing the charter, even though they didn't agree with it. But they didn't want to lose any of the essential sponsorship dollars and essential sponsorship things that come along with it. But they can't be a part of this antitrust lawsuit because they signed, even if they agree with Michael Jordan and Bob Jenkins. And there are non-compete clauses preventing teams from racing in rival series. NASCAR maintains control over things like the next-gen car, where all teams must buy parts from NASCAR-approved suppliers, so you can't even budget or cut costs in your budget by finding cheaper options elsewhere if it's not approved by NASCAR. So this is what Michael Jordan and Front Row Motorsports, Bob Jenkins, are challenging. They're saying NASCAR has created a monopoly where teams have no choice but to accept unfavorable terms or go out of business. So you think about whatever company you work for. You think about everything else in the business world around you. What if you were forced to accept an agreement like this from either the government or the governing body or the franchise owner, right? So there's a lot of different things that go into this. Now, the question is, how did we get here? What did NASCAR do that caused these teams that refused to sign to really want to go this far and pay lawyers a boatload of money to try and get some sort of judgment against NASCAR? So, introducing the charters came in 2016. So we went from there, and in 9 years later, we ended up in a federal courtroom. So the first charter agreement ran from 2016 to 2024. By 2022, teams were already expressing frustration. According to testimony, they felt the economic model was broken. Teams wanted four main things. They wanted permanent charter, a larger revenue share, and governance rights over cost increases, and a share of NASCAR's new business ventures. NASCAR secured a massive new TV deal for 7 years and $7.7 billion. And as you know, NASCAR is spread out over Fox, NBC, Warner Discovery, and Amazon. So there's races all over the place and TV money coming in, as it mentions, or as we mention, at $7.7 billion. So that's over $1 billion per year on average. And that's a 34% increase over the previous deal. Teams saw that money coming in and said, we need a bigger piece of that. If you look at other professional sports, the split between the league and the players is not 50-50, but it's much closer to that. So you're looking at, instead of about 12.5 million, you're looking at closer to 450 to $500 million a year that would be split up between the teams. So you're looking at a much higher payout than $12 million. Negotiations dragged on over 2 years. They had more than 70 meetings. They countlessly drafted and redrafted, and then came September 6, 2024. This is the date that gets mentioned over and over again in testimony. At approximately 5 p.m. on September 6th, NASCAR sent teams the final 112-page charter agreement. The deadline to sign was midnight the same day. Teams had 7 hours to review and sign a legally binding document that would govern their business over the next 7 years. Now, 112 pages of legal jargon. You would need a large team of lawyers on every single race team in order to even begin to understand what NASCAR was putting forth here. And they only give you a couple of hours, essentially, in order to decide whether you're okay with this. Now, sadly, to me, it's like if all the teams got together and said, we're not doing this as a whole, NASCAR would have been sunk. But the teams didn't have the guts to stand together as a united front against NASCAR. They were all too afraid of losing what they had. In some cases, like a Heather Gibbs, who has been handed down the Joe Gibbs Racing. It's a family legacy, but wouldn't you want to protect that by getting the best agreement possible from NASCAR instead of just kowtowing to them? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, which is why it's odd that they're starting to grumble now. However, this is what Heather Gibbs had to say. She testified that signing the agreement was like NASCAR putting a gun to your head and forcing you to sign it. She said if you don't sign, you have nothing. She said that NASCAR CEO Jim France and the France family are the ones who basically govern or own the NASCAR brand. And he basically said, he made it clear, if enough teams didn't sign, he would eliminate the charter system entirely for 2025 and beyond. Now, to me, as team owners, I'd almost be like, good, let's do that, and not sign the dotted line on a business model that I had no faith in. So it makes me wonder what else they had on all these team owners. Because if you go back to the pre-2016 model of having to qualify for every race, so be it. Like, I know you like the stability of the charter, but if they're not willing to make it permanent, we'll get rid of it. And that's a simplistic view of things. Like, there's a lot more that goes into a team that needs $50 to $100 million a year. But just do good. Race well. Be in the top 5. Be in the top 10. Be better than the other guys. And you'll be just fine. And let's see, from, I don't know, the 40s, the 50s, up till now, like 2015, that model worked really well for all the teams involved because they existed, right? So if that's what he's threatening me with as a team owner, I'm sitting here going, good, do it. And I'm telling all my other teams that are around me, because clearly they have communication with each other, or they should, I'll be like, y'all, let's stand up against this. And if they want to go backwards, let them go backwards, because then we don't have to pay money for these things that we don't even own permanently. Because if they're not willing to provide permanent ownership, where's the benefit? Makes no sense, right? But if you have, even if you want to go TV deal to TV deal and renegotiate, at least all you're negotiating at that point is the size of the revenue share that you get, right? You still permanently own the charter. So I think from both sides, from NASCAR and the team side, it would be very beneficial to make those charters permanent. And yes, once TV deals and sponsorship and all these things change, then sure, renegotiate the size of the pie based on the size that you have to work with, right? Or even if the percentages are the same, what you get paid out as a team owner goes up or down with whatever the TV deal is. To me, it's win-win from both sides if you do it that way. I don't understand why NASCAR thinks they need to be greedy, other than the fact that that's how the world works, is that greed never says enough. So obviously NASCAR is going to try and make sure they're the winners in all of this. But even if you had a 60-40, you're still coming out way ahead of the teams. So if that was the message, and I was a team owner, I'd be going to the other team owners going, yeah, let's get rid of this dang charter system, and then we don't have to worry about it no more. We can go back to buying parts where we want them from, and saving money that way and just go back to the way things were. And if they want to revisit it and make this thing permanent and do the things that they're supposed to do, or that we think they're supposed to do, then hey, I would challenge them on that. I'd call their bluff. I really would if I was a team owner. I don't know, what do you guys think? To me, use the hashtag TrueNorthSportsTalk, jump in the comments, and let me know how you guys feel about this charter system. And according to testimony, France's message was basically, if I wake up and I have 20 charters, I have 20. If I have 30, I have 30. He wasn't willing to negotiate, which to me is just not... Again, I would have called his bluff. I'd be like, come on, let's go. Let's call him on it. So what happened? 13 of the 15 charter holding teams signed. So that's 28 out of the 30, more or less, depending on how many each of 23XI and Front Row had. But they were the only teams that refused. So Denny Hamlin, he testified that he called not signing the agreement his death certificate for the future. He said, I've spent 20 years trying to make this sport grow as a driver, and for the last 5 years as a team owner. 23XI is doing our part. You can't have someone treat you this unfairly. And he's like, I knew it wasn't right. So these are the only two teams really that stood on their laurels and morals as a team and said no. If only more teams had done so. So on October 2nd, 2024, less than a month later, both teams filed their antitrust lawsuit against Nascar and CEO Jim France in federal court in Charlotte. And we keep saying Charlotte, North Carolina, simply because a lot of the teams are based out of there, and NASCAR itself is based out of there. So initially in December of 2024, the teams were granted a preliminary injunction allowing them to race as chartered entries while the lawsuit proceeded. But in June of this year, 2025, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit overturned the injunction. So starting at Dover in July, both teams had to compete as open entries, meaning no guaranteed spots and significantly less money because they were not sharing in the revenue. By all accounts, this decision cost both teams millions of dollars, and Tyler Reddick, 23XI's star driver, even sent the team a breach of contract notice because his contract stipulated that he drive for a chartered team. Now, I get where Tyler Reddick's coming from. There was something written in his contract stating that he raced for a chartered team. Looking at the situation though, that's like a kick in the cojones. Because for Tyler Reddick, that's your team. They're paying your paycheck. They're invested in seeing you do well. And for you to turn around and now sue them for breach of contract, for standing up for the right to be able to pay you more, you know what that signals to me if I'm the 12 other teams out of 15 that's in the garage? This guy's not loyal to me. Why would I want him on my team? So Tyler Reddick, I hope you know what you were doing, because you maybe just torpedoed your career as a NASCAR driver. Because if I'm 12 other teams or 13 other teams, I'm looking at this guy and I'm going, I can't trust him to be loyal to me if I sign him. And I kind of really hope that's the stance they take, because I think not only NASCAR, but the drivers really need to pay attention to what's actually happening here. So, settlement talks happened in August. They happened again in October this year. And they had over 2 days of mediation. The mediation failed, and according to reports, the two sides couldn't agree on who would even pay the mounting legal fees. So here we are. December 1st, just a few days ago, the trial begins. So, what's happened so far in the trial? So, day 1, December 1st, started with jury selection. They needed to seat 9 jurors, 6 with 3 alternates, and immediately they ran into an issue. Michael Jordan. He's arguably the most famous athlete in history, right up there with Muhammad Ali, and even Mike Tyson. And there's a few more you might name: Wayne Gretzky, Walter Payton, Greg Norman, like Tiger Woods, Kobe. The list is actually pretty short considering all the people that have played sports. He's arguably the most famous in history. Multiple potential jurors had to be dismissed because they flat out said they could not be impartial. One person literally said, "I like Mike. How do you stay neutral when MJ is sitting right there?" They also dismissed a diehard Hendrick Motorsports fan who might be biased against Denny Hamlin. And eventually, though, they got their panel. 6 men, 3 women, most of whom admitted they're not big racing fans, which it's a needle in a haystack to find people in the States who aren't big racing fans. And so that might be exactly what both sides need. Because you need people who don't have a horse in the race and don't really give a crap. They just want to know, is it fair or isn't it? So opening statements came next. Jeffrey Kessler, the attorney for 23XI in front row, he came out swinging. He told the jury that if NASCAR and Jim France eliminated all the competition, they prohibited it. They blocked it. And Kessler laid out the team's case. NASCAR is a monopoly that controls everything. They own pretty much all of the premier tracks. The tracks they don't own, they have exclusive rights agreements with, preventing them from hosting competing series. Teams must use the next-gen car. They have to buy their parts from NASCAR or NASCAR-approved suppliers. And if teams want to leave NASCAR, they can't race those same cars anywhere else for 1 year. I don't know about y'all, but pausing a business for a year isn't economically viable. He pointed to text messages and emails from NASCAR executives. Those will be shown as evidence. Messages showing that NASCAR knew teams were struggling financially, but refused to make any sort of meaningful changes. One document that's been made public is called the Amanda Chart. It showed 22 requests from teams during negotiations. NASCAR agreed to exactly one of them. That doesn't seem like any sort of fair either compromise or just a willingness to work with the teams. So there's no good faith coming from the NASCAR side, it seems. Because I think even if they gave 8, 10 of the concessions on that list to the owners, depending on what they are, then we're not sitting here talking about this right now. So Kessler told the jury that 75% of teams lost money in 2024. He said NASCAR made over $100 million in profit while paying the France Family Trust nearly $400 million over 3 years. He cited a Goldman Sachs evaluation putting NASCAR's worth at $5 billion. The NASCAR side, represented by attorney Lawrence Butterman and John Stevenson, argued that this is all sour grapes from two teams that didn't get what they wanted in negotiations. They said this charter system was created with the teams for the teams. They emphasized the charter payments increased from $9 million per car to $12.5 million per car, and that's a 62% increase from previous agreement and a 28% increase from the original 2016 deal. So NASCAR's position? Well, this is a private company that can run its business how they want to. So basically they're saying, we're a rich corporation, we can do what we want to. This is our ball, and we'll take it and go home if we want to. The teams had options. They could have walked away, raced elsewhere, but they chose to stay. And then the witnesses, they started taking the stand. So this is a classic case, basically, of corporate bullying. You can't say that people chose to stay when you're the only game in town. That just doesn't make any sense. And when you hold all the cards, when you're sitting on an ace and a king, what's the other guy supposed to do when he's only got a 6 and a 5? Like, that just don't make no sense. So the first witness that was called was Denny Hamlin. And folks, this his testimony and this lawsuit in general, it got emotional real quick. Hamlin's been through a lot. He's been a driver, he's been an owner, and there's been a lot to overcome to get where he's gotten. So his attorney asked him about his path to becoming a NASCAR driver. He started talking about his father, and he just broke down. He had to stop and compose himself. He later disclosed that at this very time that his father is on his last legs. He's not in great health, were his words. He choked up remembering how his dad supported his racing dreams and the choice he made at 20 years old to pursue racing instead of working for his dad's trailer business. Once he was able to compose himself, Hamlin got into the business side. He testified that it cost $20 million per car per season, and that's just to get the car to the track. That doesn't include driver's salary, business operations, marketing, social media, none of that. He pays Joe Gibbs Racing $8 million a year for technical support that would otherwise require hiring 100 to 150 additional people. Hamlin said that 11 of the original 19 chartered teams from 2016, those teams no longer exist because they couldn't keep going under the system. All 3 of 23 Exci's charters came from teams that had went out of business. They paid $4.7 million for the first one, $13.5 million for the second one, and $28 million for the third. Under cross-examination, NASCAR's attorney tried to paint a rosier picture, pointing out that 23XI turned profits of over $2 million in 2022, $3.5 million in 2023. Hamlin's response? Those profits should have been way higher if NASCAR's revenue split was fair. He said the only reason they're profitable at all is because of Michael Jordan's star power and his ability to to bring in sponsors. Here's the quote that hit hard. "I need Michael Jordan to operate this team. If he decides this is a stupid financial agreement and leaves, I'm done." Think about that for a second. If the only way your business can survive is the fact that your partner is happy with the way the financials work, and he's the biggest name in all of sports currently, that's a pretty big deal to your team. The attorney also tried to press Hamlin on why he paints a more positive picture of NASCAR on his podcast, and Hamlin's answer was revealing. He has said he has to regurgitate NASCAR talking points because being negative leads to retaliation and getting called to the hauler and extra scrutiny in technical inspection and that kind of thing. So, think about it. You go to work tomorrow morning and you say a couple of not so nice things about your boss. Someone tells your boss. And then what happens? All of a sudden your work isn't good enough. You're not getting enough done. They're looking for ways to create misery for you, right? That's a bully boss. That's a boss. That's not leadership. And so this is what Denny is saying that he experienced if he said anything that wasn't NASCAR talking points on his podcast. The bully boss showed up and made his life miserable. Now, that's discrimination, folks. The very definition of it. It happens every day in corporate America, and NASCAR is no different. He repeatedly called NASCAR a monopoly during his testimony, and sometimes he said it with a bit of heat involved there. And you can imagine why. He said the current charter agreement is horrible, it's absolutely unfair, and he testified that signing it would have been like signing his own death certificate. Probably would have put him out of business. So if you have a choice of staying in business or going out of business, which one you gonna choose? Especially if you love what you do. Hamlin was on the stand for nearly 4.5 hours over 2 days. His message was clear. Teams are losing money, NASCAR's making money hand over fist, and there's nowhere else for cup teams to go because there's simply no other games in town. Unless you're going to way lower tiers, you're making way less money, and you're in like a Legend Series or like a drag race or a drifting circuit or something like that. But the money is way different. So is the exposure. So, Friday, December 5th, 2 days ago, the moment everyone was waiting for, to see Michael Jordan on a witness stand. That never happened in his 20 years or more in the NBA. So the courtroom was packed. Judge Kenneth Bell even joked before Jordan entered, "I take it Mr. Jordan is the next witness. Anyone who's not already in the courtroom will not be permitted." Jordan was on the stand for about an hour, and by all accounts he remained calm. He was collected, personable, as you might expect from someone used to dealing with the media, and sometimes a hostile media for all those years. This is someone who knows how to handle pressure, right? He's that guy that took his team to 6 NBA championships. He got beat up by the Pistons. He got beat up by the Celtics. He's been through almost every high pressure thing you could imagine. You also have to remember and I feel remiss for not having mentioned this before. This is not Michael Jordan's first rodeo when dealing in the world of motorsports. For years, he was at least part owner, if not owner, of a motorcycle racing team. So he's been down this road before. He knows what it takes and the ins and outs in the racing world. So this isn't new for him either, so he can be calmer about this. But even MJ had some tense moments on the stand. He started by talking about his love of NASCAR. Obviously, he grew up in North Carolina, the epicenter of NASCAR. Talked about how his mom and dad took him and his brother to races in Rockingham, Darlington, Talladega, Charlotte. All this when he was a kid. This isn't some celebrity vanity project. Jordan has always had a love for autosports racing and is a genuine NASCAR fan. He explained his role in 23XI Racing. He's the majority owner at 60%, with Denny Hamlin and Curtis Polk as minority owners. He's invested $35 to $40 million in the team. His role is 100 feet up, as he put it, so he's not in the day-to-day operations, but he attends 10 to 12 races per year. That's almost half of them. He stays closely involved through his longtime business manager, Curtis Polk. When asked why 23XI bought a third charter in the middle of this lawsuit, Jordan's answer was classic MJ. People who know me know I like to win, and I will pursue anything to win. Getting a third charter improves our chances to win the championship. And if you know anything about Michael, that was a dumbed down version or a nice tie way of saying he wants to put his foot to the NASCAR garage's throat, because that's how he does. And if you know anything about him, that's classic Jordan. Jordan compared NASCAR to the NBA. In basketball, the league and players split revenue around 50-50. There's shared responsibility for growth as well as loss. In NASCAR, teams get far less. They also have no governance rights. He told the jury that he wanted a partnership with NASCAR. To me, that sounds fair. Why not? You're working together to grow the business of auto racing. Why shouldn't you be partners and work together? NASCAR's leadership, and I hesitate to call them that, because that's not true leadership, that's boss. So NASCAR's bosses wouldn't even consider the team's core requests. The pillars that the teams wanted, no one on the NASCAR side even thought to negotiate or compromise about. They weren't even open-minded to have those conversations. That's a bully. Jordan specifically called out Jim France. He said, "I never saw Jim France drive a car and risk his life. He never had to." That line hit hard. Jordan's point was that drivers and teams put everything on the line, but the France family are the ones reaping the rewards and the benefits without taking any of the risk. Sounds like a greedy, spoiled child to me, and a bully. He explained why 23XI didn't sign the September 2024 charter agreement, and there were 3 reasons. 1, it wasn't economically viable. Makes sense. 2, it contained a no-sue clause that Jordan believed violated antitrust law. I agree with him. 3, the 7-hour ultimatum really wasn't enough time to fully consider what was being handed to them, and I agree with that also. Jordan testified that he felt he could challenge Nascar simply because, in true Jordan style, he's not afraid of the big bad bully. NASCAR's nothing compared to what the Pistons threw at him. Point blank. He said longtime team owners had been browbeaten for so many years trying to make a change. He was the new guy, but unlike some of those other teams, he had the resources and the platform to fight the bully and the giant. Someone had to step forward and challenge the entity, Jordan said. As a fan of the sport, it needed to be looked at from a whole different perspective. And that is why we are here, meaning in the courtroom, fighting this antitrust. Even during cross-examination, Jordan remained likable. When NASCAR's attorneys finished, he told Jordan, "My 9-year-old thinks I'm pretty cool today." And Jordan joked back, "You're not wearing any Jordans today." The testimony was powerful. You had arguably the greatest athlete of all time and someone who understands winning and business, as you can imagine with Jordan Jump Brand, the franchise that he owns under the Nike umbrella. He understands sports franchises better than almost anyone, being the owner of the Charlotte Hornets for all those years, saying that NASCAR's system is fundamentally broken. It's pretty hard to argue with that particular testimony. You also have someone like Miss Gibbs and Bob Jenkins, another owner, who are saying the same thing, but Miss Gibbs, even though she married into the Gibbs family, spent most of her adult life to this point as a team owner, being involved in the team. Their son is a driver, a really experienced person when it comes to this sport. You have all these really important people to the sport saying there's something wrong here. It takes a really calloused and hard owner like Jim France to just stick his head in the sand and not going la 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 la, I don't hear you. Wake up, buddy. You're about to experience revolt and mutiny in your own organization. And if all the teams leave, all 15 of them, what are you left with? A bunch of tracks you own that you can't pay the bills on? You're going to lose your TV deal. So wake up. Come to the table with an open mind. And who knows, maybe they'll make you even richer by you coming to the table and negotiating in good faith. Because so far, from everything I've read and experienced about this case, there's no good faith negotiation here. It's take it or leave it tactics from a bully boss that has no leadership ability whatsoever. If I'm the board of directors of NASCAR, if there is one, I'd be looking at replacing Jim France. Because that guy is going to put you out of business if he keeps going. So, are there other key testimonies besides Jordan and Hamlin that got most of the headlines? Well, Bob Jenkins, the owner of Front Row Motorsports, he testified also. And he said he's lost $100 million since starting his team in 2004. He's never turned a profit, not once. Yet his team won the 2021 Daytona 500, one of NASCAR's most prestigious races. Think about that. You can win the Daytona 500 and still be $100 million in the hole. Thankfully, his other businesses allow him to keep this one afloat because this is a passion project for him. So Jenkins backed up Hamlin's account of the September 6th deadline, calling it a take it or leave it offer that he felt was insulting. Heather Gibbs, as we mentioned, co-owner of Joe Gibbs Racing, gave some of the most emotional testimony. Remember, her husband Coy, the son of Joe Gibbs, died suddenly in 2022. So she stepped into a leadership role. She testified that signing the charter agreement felt like a gun to your head moment. She said Joe Gibbs Racing, with 450 employees and 4 charters, needs permanent charters to secure their investment, and without them, they are constantly vulnerable. And that includes the $8 million that 23XI is paying them. They're still going to be in trouble. Gibbs also revealed details about a letter she sent to NASCAR leadership in May of 2024. She was begging them for permanent charters and fairer terms. According to Expo testimony, Jim France read that letter and out loud was swearing every other sentence. His response essentially killed any hope of teams getting what they wanted. NASCAR President Steve O'Donnell testified about his meetings with Curtis Polk, Jordan's business manager. O'Donnell called them the most difficult meetings I've had with an individual in my 30 years in NASCAR. He said Polk once threatened to kick him out of his own meeting. Well, maybe because someone gave you a dose of truth, and that's never happened in the 30 years that you've been in NASCAR, because everyone kisses your butt to try and stay afloat, and someone came along and gave you a bit of reality check and you didn't like it. So it sounds like you poked the bear and nearly got kicked out of your own meeting. So that's what happens to bullies when a bigger dog comes to the yard and isn't willing to back down. What's interesting is that the text messages between O'Donnell and NASCAR Commissioner Steve Phelps were entered as evidence. These texts show that even NASCAR's own leadership knew the teams needed better terms. But Jim France, who has the final say and is the big boss bully, wouldn't budge on key issues like permanent charters. That's bad faith negotiation. That's bully tactics. And so this is the thing, right? Is that's why Michael fought back so hard, and why he's going to fight back so hard. Because he doesn't deal well with bullies. Ask the 1991 Pistons. He will go out, he will work, he will build himself up and strengthen himself that you can't bully him no more. So NASCAR, this is warning to you. This ain't the dog to mess with. So where do we go from here? The trial is scheduled to go for 10 days, running through to mid-December, so we should have some finality to the trial by Christmas time, and the stakes could not be higher. So what happens if 23XI and Front Row win? First, the jury will determine monetary damages, and actual damages only. But here's the thing with antitrust law. The judge can triple that amount. So, the teams are reportedly seeking over $300 million in damages. If the judge triples that, we're talking almost $1 billion that NASCAR is going to have to pay out. But money's only part of it. Judge Kenneth Bell will also determine antitrust remedies. And so this is where things get wild. According to legal experts, NASCAR insiders like Bob Pockras, the possible remedies include: the judge could institute permanent charters, so teams would own their charters outright and not lease them. They could force NASCAR to sell tracks, so that breaks up the France family's ownership of racing venues. He could eliminate the charter system entirely and make them start from scratch. He could end the next-gen single supplier model and let teams source parts from multiple vendors, helping them to bring down their operating costs. And he could remove the non-compete and exclusivity clauses allowing teams to race elsewhere. So basically, if Jenkins and Jordan win, along with Denny Hamlin and the other facets involved, then all the owners win. And as I mentioned, if Judge Bell fundamentally restructures how NASCAR operates, they could lose everything. And why? Because Jim France thought he knew better. Rick Mast, a former NASCAR driver, called the team's victory a potential death sentence for NASCAR as we know it. He said it could lead to the inmates running the asylum. I don't think that's quite how it would be. I just think it forces NASCAR to be more fair in how it deals with its teams. It's not that the inmates would run the asylum necessarily, it's just they get treated fairly. What's wrong with that? Mark Martin, another retired driver, a guy I've always respected in the past, said he doesn't see a positive outcome no matter which way it falls. The sport is going to be changed monumentally either way. Here's the kicker. No matter what the jury decides, one way or the other, there will be appeals. Will in capital letters. If NASCAR loses, they'll immediately appeal. If the teams lose, they likely will too. So this could drag on for years to come. The Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals could take another 1 to 2 years just before they hear the case. And until then, the NASCAR teams are going to struggle to get through. During the appeals process, sponsors, media partners, everyone else in the industry will be in limbo. Nobody wants to invest heavily in a sport where the business structure might be overturned on basically on a dime. So, what happens if NASCAR wins? If NASCAR prevails, the charter system stays as it is. The current agreement holds. The 13 teams that signed are protected, but 23XI in front row, they'd be stuck racing as open teams, which is financially devastating. Tyler Reddick, Bubba Wallace, Todd Gilliland, they all have contract clauses allowing them to leave if their teams aren't chartered. These teams could literally shut down within a year. And that would be a devastating message to the other teams, allowing the bully to continue bullying. So I know they won't hear me. It's very unlikely. But the message is this to all those jurors and to Judge Bell. Think very carefully about allowing NASCAR to win. That's the wrong message. You are allowing a billion-dollar corporation to squash its employees and basically treat them like really high-paid slaves. That ain't right. No one, I don't care how much money you make, no one should be treated that way. And even if NASCAR wins, the damage is done. All those text messages, financial disclosures, internal communications, they're now public. Richard Childress Racing has already hinted at legal action over defamatory text messages from NASCAR executives about their owner. There's also a middle scenario that nobody's really talking about, and that could be that mid-trial or shortly after the trial, maybe Jim France comes to his senses and is willing to make a settlement. Both sides tried to settle in October. They failed. Judge Bell has been clear that he's open to it. And maybe the reality of a trial and a jury forces both sides to come together and find the common ground. From what I've learned about Jim France over this time, doesn't seem real likely, but you never know. If his lawyers give him any indication that he could be losing this trial, maybe, just maybe, we see some chinks in that armor and the bully boss gets brought to his knees. So we'll see. So why does this matter beyond just NASCAR? Well, this is fundamentally a case about sports franchise models and antitrust law. So if 23XI and Front Row win, it sets a precedent. Could NFL teams challenge the league structure? Could NBA teams push for permanent franchises with more governance rights? Could drivers in other racing series use this case to sue their sanctioning bodies? There's a lot of ramifications here. The comparison to Formula One is interesting. F1 has the Concord Agreement, which is negotiated between the teams, and the FIA, which is the governing body there, and Formula One management teams that have real power in these negotiations. Ferrari even has a special veto. It's not perfect, but it's a more balanced approach than what NASCAR is offering. 23XI's argument is essentially, we want something that's closer to that model. We want to be partners and not contractors. I don't see how that's not a fair request. They call them team owners, but that's not really what they are. There's also the broader question of what sports ownership should look like in the 21st century. Are teams just renters, or should they have permanent stakes? Should leagues be able to operate with near total control? Or do antitrust laws require a more balanced power structure? And let's talk about diversity. 23XI Racing was founded in 2020 during a lot of that BLM nonsense. And so Michael Jordan, he became the first black majority owner of a Cup Series team. And that was historic. Because if you remember, I mentioned Brad Doherty. Well, he wasn't the majority owner of that team he was involved in. Bubba Wallace is the only black driver at the Cup level at the moment. 23XI has made diversity, equity, inclusion a core part of their mission, and they have a full-time DEI role, which is unusual in NASCAR. So if this lawsuit basically destroys 23XI, that's a huge loss for the sport's efforts to diversify. Now, even if Jordan goes away and certain other things, Bubba Wallace probably will drive somewhere else. So it's not completely wiped out because he'd still be there. But it would definitely take a really, really large blow. So, we're up over the hour. I hope you stuck around and got to this point with me. So where do I land on all of this? To me, I look at it and it's not that I get NASCAR's position in terms of the wisdom of it, but I get where they're going. They've built this sport essentially from like a backyard, do it for fun hobby sport into a multi-billion-dollar business. They've been working at it for almost 100 years now. They've taken, over the years, a lot of financial risk. They've invested in tracks. They've negotiated TV deals. And they want to protect their investment and maintain control. So I get wanting to protect your investment. I get wanting to maintain a certain level of control. By coming to the table in good faith and negotiating with these teams open-mindedly instead of saying take it or leave it, I think that you do a better job of protecting your investment. And to some degree, you maintain your control because it shows the teams that you're willing to work with them, and then they're willing to work with you. And together you fight to bring the sport up to new heights, new levels, new sources of income and revenue that you never had before. But to be closed-minded, to be a bully boss, to say take it or leave it, because you're scared to take that step, you could lose everything. You could bankrupt your family's legacy. Why? Because you thought you knew better. So this is the thing. I kind of get why they want to protect it, but what better way to protect your company than to have happy employees? The best companies, the ones that are most productive, most efficient, get the job done the best, are the ones who value the happiness of their employees. Now, outside of this podcast, I work for a company that doesn't understand that. Do you, as the viewer, work for a company also who doesn't understand that? But the truth is that if you have the happiest employees, they will do anything to make sure your company succeeds. And at the same time, NASCAR really has to understand, people aren't going to lose money and continue to operate. I don't know about you, but I can't lose millions and millions and millions and billions of dollars and continue operating a company. That's just not smart business. So Mr. France, if by some chance you come across this video, understand something. If you try the iron fist you've been trying, you will lose billions with a capital B, because these teams will eventually put down the keys and walk away because you thought you could get more from them instead of making them happy, and then everyone wins. You have to work together. You have to see what works best for both sides, not just your own. In this case, you work together. You are co-workers, meaning you work together. And that's the thing, that most bosses fail at leadership, true leadership, because leaders understand that without the people that work, and this is the key word, with you, not for you, they work with you. And if you don't have them all pulling in the same direction, with the same mentality, you all lose. And that's the problem with so many so-called, they want to call themselves leaders, but they're just bosses. And no one wants to work with those type of people. And so then the sponsors get wind of that. They've already got wind of a lot of stuff you didn't want them to. And that gives them pause. That gives them second thoughts. And even as a fan of the sport myself, and the millions of other fans that watch you on a weekly basis and are invested in you, when we see you treating the teams that make you the money this way, I've always wanted to come to a NASCAR race. I've never had the chance. But I have a lot more pause after this court trial about wanting to give you my money and come see a race. Why? Because I know how you're behaving. And you have ministers come and pray before every race. You market yourself as a family-friendly event. But you act in a very ungodly manner towards your teams. And so that's the thing. It gives me pause to want to spend money on your product. I think Michael Jordan is right when he says that teams should be partners and not just renters. A closer revenue split to 50-50 would be more beneficial to you. Why? Because then the more they get, the more they invest. The more they can invest in becoming better and making your product look better. It's a win-win. I don't understand why you can't see that. So you might not think it's realistic for NASCAR, but you could work towards it. Let's get the percentages higher than they were. Let's make the teams feel like they're more of a partner than just your whipping boy. Because all of these teams sound like none of them is happy. And not only are you going to have to deal with this lawsuit, but it sounds like you got more that are coming to you from other teams that have now found out what you've been saying about them behind closed doors. So the fact that 13 teams signed that September agreement, that doesn't indicate fairness. It means they felt like they had no choice. As Heather Gibbs said, it was a gun to your head thing. That's not negotiation. That's coercion. As I said, that's bully tactics. And in a world where we're looking to eliminate bully tactics, this has to be concerning for anyone who looks at it. So, this lawsuit could blow up the sport. If the judge dismantles the charter system, smaller teams could face ramifications and be devastated. If NASCAR is forced to sell tracks or lose control of certain things, where does the sport go? Who runs it? I think, simply, if you replace some key people at the top of the organization, Jim France, the other two guys that were mentioned, and have people in place that are willing negotiators to operate in good faith, I think it can be salvaged. The question is NASCAR willing to make the necessary changes? And the guy who's in control, as in Jim France, don't look like he thinks he's ready to make any sort of changes, himself being the first major one that needs to go. I think we do need a shakeup. I think NASCAR needs to grow up a little bit, or at least the leadership, the bosses need to grow up. They need someone to fight back against them. We don't know for sure what's coming next, but I'm going to be watching with bated breath, and hopefully you guys will be too. Hopefully this is a topic that interested you, and let us know. Use the hashtag TrueNorthSportsTalk. Let us know what your thoughts are on what's going on in NASCAR right now. One thing's for sure, we are literally watching history unfold right in front of us. Whether you're a NASCAR fan or not, this trial could have ramifications even in whatever sport you are interested in, So it's worth keeping at least part of your eye on what's happening here and see what comes of it. Maybe a lot, maybe nothing, but it's worth watching. So there's our deep dive, our look into this antitrust issue that's going on in NASCAR. As I mentioned, I want to hear from you guys what you think. Do you think Michael Jordan is right to sue NASCAR? Are the teams being greedy? Is NASCAR being monopolistic and bullyish? So, hit me up. Let me know what you think. Leave a comment. Get into the DMs, and we'll be following this trial closely. And perhaps down the line, at least in our shorts, maybe we'll do another True North episode and give you the updates. So for today, I appreciate you listening. Stick around to the end. This is True North Sports Talk. And until next time, stay informed, stay passionate, and we'll see you again next week.